Regardless of whether you're a rookie or a pro, most RVers will agree that maneuvering a home on wheels is not always easy. Extra precautions have to be taken when performing actions as straightforward as stopping, turning, or parking. Simply driving can even be troublesome on highways, uneven terrain, or in harsh weather. Basic maintenance can also be more complex with RVs, such as when you have to change a flat tire. Nevertheless, many of us voluntarily endure these short-lived obstacles in exchange for the overall enjoyment RVing provides. But what if these momentary inconveniences were challenges you encountered on a daily basis, such as the struggles faced by people with physical disabilities? The idea of RVing when daily tasks are distinctly more complicated probably doesn't seem all that inviting. But let's consider this situation from a more optimistic standpoint, as a conquest rather than a conflict. And to better convey this confidence of RVing with a disability is a couple who have managed to overcome the burden of life in a wheelchair to bettering their life in an RV.
I'm Jim Gerton. I'm originally from Flagstaff, Arizona. It's my wife, Mica.
Originally from Flagstaff, Arizona, and we've been living full-time on the road for 18 months now.
So when we pull into a park, we're not exactly the normal couple RVing. We'll pull in and people watch everyone park. I don't care what it says, everyone watches everybody, whether you see them or not. So they see her get out and they're like, oh, okay, got a neighbor. And then she comes around the truck and gets my wheelchair out. They're like, oh, this is gonna be good. We're gonna see how this whole thing is gonna go down. My first RV was after Hurricane Andrew. Bought one to live in while the house was being rebuilt and everything. Then had that for a year or two, and then then normal life took over, and had the 9-to-5 job in the house and the career and all that.
My first RV was the one that we purchased together right after our wedding, and we ended up doing a trip up to Madras, Oregon for the solar eclipse that I put on, and was for about 3,500 people, and we took 3 weeks to come home. And when we crossed over into the Arizona-California line, we looked at each other and said, we don't want to go home. And that was exactly 1 year to the day we moved into our new RV. So that sold us on it, and we were hooked.
The origin story of how we've all come to this nomadic chapter in our lives often begins when curious travelers sample the sweetness of life on the road, which then results in selling the majority of their belongings at home, and in many cases, the home itself. But what distinguishes Jim and Mica's new beginning most is the additional pair of wheels necessary for their journey.
In 2013, I suffered a spinal stroke, a rare type of stroke, to where the artery in my spine collapsed. When it first happened, I couldn't move anything below my waist, so it left me pretty much in a wheelchair. And now, since 2013, I've gotten back to about 30% strength and about 70% range of motion. So a couple challenges in the traveling field, but we've made it work. We've had the support of my wonderful wife and great friends that have encouraged us to do this, and it doesn't stop us, it just slows us down a little bit, but we make do with the challenges that we come across.
Perhaps one of these challenges would be finding a rig that could accommodate Jim's physical limitations, but choosing their rolling home was no trouble, since RVs are actually quite practical for someone with partial mobility, as their narrow, compact design makes everything fairly accessible. Of course, special modifications can always be made for additional support, such as ramps or handrails, but Jim and Mica have managed just fine by utilizing their floor plan very efficiently for their circumstances.
So we chose the RV that we now live in because of the side patio, and it was also a fifth wheel, and we needed the versatility of being able to have 2 vehicles because we both freelance work. We have a 45-foot fifth wheel, and with the side patio, which allows Jim to go inside and outside without having to crawl up and down the steps. So that was the main deciding factor on that one. A couple modifications we did. It did come with a king bed, and we cut the king bed into a queen bed to give extra room on Jim's side of the bed for him to easily get up. We took out the standard dinette that came in the RV and put lighter metal chairs and a smaller table to make it more accessible for Jim to get around the table. And then the desks in the back, which being a 13-foot garage gave us a lot of room.
We don't use the wheelchair in the trailer at all. I don't think it's ever seen the inside of the trailer. Mainly just a walker or have to crawl, just knowing that that's how I'm getting around.
Speaking of getting around, this duo make an impressive team when it comes to making camp.
We do each have a role. When we pull into a campsite, I'm primarily driving the fifth wheel, and Mica has gotten a great sense on where we need to be in distances and how much room for hookups and all that. So once she gets us guided in and everything, then as she gets my wheelchair out of the truck, I will start with the leveling system and all that, and then she will go for pulling out the hoses and power cords and sewer lines, and we kind of tag team on that. She'll bring it so far, I can finish it, and then as the trailer's getting set up, I do my roundabout on the outside, and she jumps in and takes care of the insides and gets the puppies all squared away and animals all accounted for, and we make do. Like I said, we with our kind of teamwork, that I've got my things that I do and she's got her part, that we've probably had more people come up to us and say they're impressed on how we did it and how efficient we are in doing it than most people are like, yeah, I've been doing it for an hour and a half and I'm still not set up, and you guys are done in 30 to 45 minutes. So it's kind of rewarding to hear people give us kudos for our setup and tear down.
Kudos are definitely in order, not just for being efficient, but for demonstrating that a disability shouldn't inhibit an experience as great as RVing. Jim and Mica decided not to let their misfortune become an excuse in life, and instead made it a reason to live without limits. Their only setback was waiting so long.
We would have started our journey sooner if we would have, really have known that we were going to be so fulfilled. And I think that if we can do one thing through this journey is inspire one person to not let their disability stop them, then I will be totally fulfilled with that.
And I guess my part would be, follow your heart. Don't use the disability as an excuse. Use it to your advantage. Go for it. Just follow your passion. Go out and live it. Life's too short.
What we hope to achieve from life on the road is similar from one RVer to the next, since we're all chasing a comparable dream. Yet how we come to realize that dream is usually distinguished by those who dive in without hesitation and those who take small steps to make absolutely sure that RVing is right for them. Brian and Melissa slowly incorporated RVing into their lives as it became intertwined with many significant milestones, beginning with how they met, to vacationing with kids, to several anniversaries, and now retirement.
I am Melissa Purcell, sitting next to my husband, Brian. We've been married for 30 years. We actually just celebrated our wedding anniversary 3 days ago. So we met, when I was fresh out of high school, 18 years old, didn't really know what I was gonna do with my life, and I was at work, and he had a friend that worked with me, and he came to visit his friend.
And I actually had, at the time, I had a Volkswagen camper van. So this was quite a while ago, obviously, and so while they would be working, I would be hanging out in the parking lot in my camper van. For me, it kind of got started. I enjoyed going out in that thing, and it had a bed and a little cooler in there and a pop top, and it's just where I would hang out while they were working, and on their breaks we would talk and get to know each other. So yeah, that was probably my first RV experience, and yeah, since then we've had a lot of experiences actually in that van.
Yeah.
Before getting into the big RV thing. But that's kind of how it started. And where it eventually led was RVing with the whole family, which typically, as part-timers, presented some restrictions. Since our kids were school age, for most of the time when we were RVing with them, we were working full-time, obviously, and we had to plan it around their school schedule. So if there was a spring break,
we would plan an RV trip. We didn't want to stay around where we lived too many times, but we always kind of yearned for going out on some sort of adventure. So while we did do some camping nearby, on some weekends and things like that, we would have to plan. Probably spring break was a typical getaway for us in the RV, and then some bigger trip during the summer, and then throughout the in-between times we would do something nearby, for a weekend or a long weekend.
Well, and also when we planned our trips, you figure we had a limited amount of time to do it. So if you have a week or if you have 2 weeks, we actually couldn't go too far. So what we would do is plan on how can we get there as quick as possible and maximize our time there. And then when we were done, it was like, you got a day or two to get home. So once our kids were grown and gone, it became much more relaxed for us, RVing, and it wasn't about trying to keep the kids entertained anymore and having to have all of these different stops that we knew would be fun for them. For us, we could go a little slower. We could, if you see something on the side of the road or if you just see like a really great location, you could stop. A lot more boondocking because we didn't need to have all the amenities that the kids need to keep themselves entertained, especially at night.
And we didn't make any plans at that point. We would just have an idea of where generally we wanted to go, and we would just go. Where before we would have to make all these reservations, and we're kind of fixed into a time frame. And so that was one of the big changes, was just being able to just go and make it up as we went.
But again, as we were working though, we still were limited on the amount of time. And so, but then it was up to us what we wanted to do. And maybe it's just going one place and just staying there and just decompressing and relaxing and taking in the scenery.
Now that Brian and Melissa have retired, they've tossed any restrictions out the window and freestyle to make the most of their experience. Because whether you dive in head first or test the waters slowly, in the end, RVing is truly worth the plunge.
I imagine that moving forward, there's just going to be new opportunities to have new adventures and see new things.
Making more memories.
And meet new people along the way. And we don't really know when it would end, but it's just the way that we prefer to explore and travel now.
Yeah.
We're here in beautiful Harrison Hot Springs, British Columbia, along the spectacular Harrison River. There is nothing out here in terms of RV parks or hookups. No power, no electric, no sewer. We're off the grid here. And we came here to talk about solar. We've just upgraded our solar system from a paltry 375 watts, I think we had?
That's correct, yes. We had 3 125-watt panels.
What have we got now?
We are currently pumping out 1,300 watts total.
And that comes from 2 separate banks of Xtreme solar panels. We have rigid panels that are more traditional style.
Right, those are glass with an aluminum frame surrounding them and the typical looking cells.
And then we've got flexible panels, which are new from Xtreme, and they are peel and stick. Now, a common misconception about solar is that it runs all of the things on your RV, and technically that's not true. Technically, your RV is run by batteries, not solar. All solar does is charge the batteries.
That's right. So basically, as the solar panels are putting out power, it's being captured and accumulated in your battery bank. And then your battery bank is what everything in your RV is hooked up to, whether it's a 12-volt light or a 12-volt fan, or your inverter that's converting that 12-volt power into 110-volt power to power things like your microwave or your laptop charger or your TV set. So the solar panels on our roof are basically just a large funnel collecting electrons from the sun and channeling them all down into our battery to replace the power that we're using.
Now, before you figure out how much solar you need for your RV, you need to do something called an audit. And an audit is where you basically tally up all of the things that use power on your RV and figure out how much your average usage is every day.
Right, so if you tend to run a 1 amp light for 2 hours a day, that's 2 amp hours worth of power being pulled out of your batteries. If you run your microwave, that's just maybe it pulls 10 amps when it's running, and you run that for 10 minutes, well, that's 1/6 of an hour times 10. I can't do the math in my head, but you
can figure it out.
You add all of that stuff up, and you're going to get a total of the number of amp hours you use out of your battery bank in a 24-hour period.
There are tools online that help calculate all this out, but doing an audit is a good way to get an idea of how much power you use every day on your RV. And one of the factors involved is learning to be frugal with power. It isn't just about how much power you can put out, it's about how to use less. Things like LED lights, things like going to bed when the sun goes down, taking shorter showers, because not only does that save water, it runs the 12-volt water pump less. So all these things tie together to being a good boondocker who can stay off the grid for longer periods of time without resorting to either generators or heading to a full hookup campground to replenish your resources.
So after you've done your audit and added up all of the power draws that you use in your 24-hour period, figuring out how much power you actually consume a day, you'll then need to use that in order to figure out what size battery bank you need, because that's what's actually going to provide all of that power to you.
And also keep in mind that dry camping isn't just being out in the boondocks. You can dry camp in a campground in an assigned site that you paid for. If you're in a national forest or a national park, you may be paying to be in a campsite with no hookups at all, but you could be in the forest where there are trees blocking all of your solar. So those things need to be taken into consideration. So now once you've figured out how much power you use and how big your storage bank should be,
then you can figure out how much solar you need in order to fill that storage bank and replenish the power that you use. So again, there are correction factors that you want to put into this in order to take into account differences in the number of hours of light in a day and the number of shaded hours you may get, that kind of thing. You're going to pad the number a little bit and install a solar system that is actually larger than you need in order to account for those variations.
For any RVer looking to incorporate solar into their lives, having an understanding of just how far the technology has come over the years can be quite telling.
So we mentioned earlier that we replaced our old solar panels, that we had 3 of them that put out 125 watts each. And we replaced them with units that put out significantly more, 160 watts for the rigid panels and 165 for the flexibles. The rigid panels we've installed are actually physically smaller than the 125-watt panels we used to have on the roof. And the reasons behind that have to do with improvements in efficiency that we don't even understand. So we're going to talk to some of the experts at Xtreme in order to find out a little bit more about what makes these panels so much more efficient than our old ones.
Xtreme offers a range of solar solutions, from roof-mounted to portable to rigid and flexible options. Their output mirrors the extent to which solar itself continues to evolve, all of which offers RVers the ability to maximize battery life and prolong the power supply of their RV while they're off the grid.
Tell us a little bit about the differences between flexible and rigid panels. How are they different?
So this is more of a traditional style, the aluminum frame around the actual panels, gone to now a really thin profile, very, very flexible panel, much easier to install.
Are there differences in output, or does some do better in shade versus direct sun? If there's partial shading, is there an advantage or disadvantage to either one?
Not really an advantage to the two. They still act exactly the same way. It's just the efficiencies are getting better over the years. The technologies are getting better, and because of that, your performance is getting better, right? So you're getting more harvest out of the sun for essentially the same amount of surface area.
Now, when it comes to tilting, we've been well aware for a long time that in the winter, the sun is low in the sky, and that means that tilting the panels has an advantage. Now, these panels can be mounted in such a way, the rigid panels in such a way that they can be tilted. That's not necessarily an option with the flexibles in in practical terms, is it?
Right. In practical terms, no. This would be mounted directly to the surface of an RV or a rooftop of a home, let's just say, or a shed or whatever it may be. Whereas with the other ones, you could mount them to other frames and tilt them up, much as like you have on your RV. And it, as you can tell, it does offer more power production or more output for you, so you can get more harvest from the sun. These could be actually mounted on a frame if you really wanted to. If you deemed you wanted to mount it onto a frame, you could tilt it and use it that way as well. There's nothing stopping people from doing that.
We saw that these are peel and stick.
Correct.
Which made them incredibly easy to put down.
Yep.
We were done in no time. And I assume, of course, there are advantages to not screwing into the roof if you can avoid it for water penetration benefits?
Correct, yeah. So this does save you from penetrating the roof with any sort of hardware. Again, peel and stick, pull it off. It's a adhesive that will stick for the life of the panel. It's not going to come off. And the only hole that you need to drill is the final return to go into your RV, which is, again, is a sealed gland plate and or box that most people put in. So you only make one drill hole in the top of your RV versus multiples, depending on the number of panels that you need to put in.
And that return into the RV, you're talking about the cables themselves that provide the solar power down into the RV.
Correct, down into the RV, exactly.
One thing we noticed when we were installing our panels is that the flexible panels weigh less than the rigid panels, especially with the tilt mechanisms that we added under ours. That's another benefit, especially for people with maybe a smaller RV that's more concerned about weight.
Absolutely, yeah. So the new panels have no weight issues when it comes to loading, the number of panels you put on your roof, all that sort of stuff. Those all go away with these type of thin panels.
One of the things people have spoken about when they've installed flexible panels is that they can walk all over them and dance on them and act like they're just regular part of the roof, and then they have ended up damaging the structure. Now, I know these are also not designed to be walked on, correct?
Correct.
But that doesn't mean they're not still more robust.
You're not supposed to be walking them. Obviously, it says here no step. But even if you do damage, I can see there's multiple bus bars in each of these cells, and it will always almost self-heal. It doesn't have to be stuck down one specific path. That's why there are so many bus bars. It's like a matrix almost, where you have those multiple paths in order to maintain power output of these panels. It also it's quite flexible in installation and installation ease. So having people carrying it, we had to be cognizant of people carrying it up onto their roofs. And essentially, if they, dropped it, let's just say, or it slipped out of their hands when they're installing it, this will not have any issue. Whereas your risk, obviously, with a glass panel is that you could cause some damage to it if you dropped it off the roof. Even
though solar panels, to many people, may just seem like, oh, a solar panel is a solar panel, we found that after having our 323-watt panels in place for 14 years, technology had indeed advanced, and it was exciting to see we now had two choices, and obviously we couldn't choose between the two. We had to have both.
Right.
We find that having the ability not to run our generator is a big benefit. We didn't get an RV to go out tent camping. We want to be comfortable and be able to use our devices and stay connected, and the power to push those is all coming from our solar panels that feed down into our battery bank, that then feeds into the house directly with 12-volt DC power and through our Xantrex inverter using 110 volts, 120 volts AC.
With advances in efficiency and the bounty of options available in solar technology on the market, RVers no longer have to sacrifice the peace and quiet of the boondocks for the abrasive sound of a generator. Thanks to modern solar, it's possible to have peace and quiet without having to sacrifice the comforts of home.